Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Ben Kingsley is joining me. Ben, how are you?
Good, thanks, Pat.
Good. And you, I'm going to get the name of your company right one night. It's Imperium?
Imperium
Yes.
Advisors, yes.
Excellent.
Yep.
How can we connect with you?
You can connect with me on email, info@imperiumadvisors.com.
Yeah.
So
There you go. Website?
I do have a website. It's not the greatest. Working on that. I'm working on other people's websites.
Yeah, but,
the problem.
yes,
I haven't
you
had
are.
time to work on my own.
Actually, you are. Anyway, our guest tonight is a repeat guest, William Moore, who's president, I love that title, of the Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, Pat.
Bill,
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Great to see you again.
Thank you. And we're going to jump right into news, breaking news, first time ever on our show. It's June 17th, and tomorrow Bill will be making an announcement, and so we thought we'd beat the press.
Well, you're going to beat the press, but by the time it
Yeah, I know.
airs,
Well,
you're going to be about a week and a half.
It feels good right now.
I will be leaving the Central Vermont Chamber to become the president and CEO of the Greater New Britain, Connecticut Chamber of Commerce. It's an opportunity that came up,
great.
and it's home, so
Yeah.
we'll be making that transition.
That's where family and friends are and
Yes.
stuff. And I must tell you, I just told this to Bill. He is probably the best person I have met in among the Vermont chambers. You are excellent,
you.
and I know every member is going to be very unhappy when they hear this. You have got a background that's staggering.
Well, it's not staggering. Each item is just one more line in the obituary column.
It's going to be a big one.
I would try to be a little more optimistic than that.
So we always ask, we always ask people to talk about themselves. So you go right ahead and tell us a little bit about that staggering background.
Well, I was born at a very young age, very close to my mom and dad. What you'd want to really be interested in would be my professional background. I started in Chamber of Commerce Management back in 1979, where I grew up at the Greater Waterbury, Connecticut Chamber of Commerce, and my boss, Frank Folco, I think he saw something in me, or he decided maybe we need to get rid of this guy, because he recommended me to the U.S. Chamber, and I was there 9 months later. I worked in the New York City office for the Chamber doing legislative initiatives and setting up grassroots networks for a 10-state region. 110 congressional districts. It was just mammoth. A lot of fun, though, and I stayed there until drafted by the Providence Chamber to be their vice president, general manager. I handled all their lobbying. We had 4 lobbyists on staff at the Chamber. It's a good-sized staff. And I managed day-to-day operations there, and stayed there until Southeastern Connecticut Chamber opened up, and I was invited to go down there, and I said, no, I'm not interested. I'm very happy and comfortable in Providence, but some people really beat me up and forced me to go. So I went down there and had some great experiences through some very tumultuous times, the mid-80s to mid-90s, when we saw a banking crisis come in, housing crisis come in.
Right.
Defense downsizing in New London County was enormous, the entry of casino gaming. We went from, as one friend of mine said, we went from engineers to croupiers. And it was, it was a really interesting time. Had the opportunity to go to a statewide trade association, Connecticut Associated Builders and Contractors, and worked with them for a while until I was invited by a friend of mine to join his company, which I'm still a partner in, Organization Dynamics. And we do consulting for nonprofits, not-for-profits, chambers of commerce, trade associations, and economic development groups. It's a very small group. We're very focused on what we do and how we handle things. But I got bored, and I wanted to get back into the game. I like the daily hands-on things, so I went out and I became the president of the Greater Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and did that for a while until my friend dragged me back to Organization Dynamics. And I did that till I got the itch again and said, you know what? And I started looking around, and the Central Vermont Chamber opened. And I took a look at it, talked it over with my wife. I graduated from St. Mike's. 4 of my daughters went to St. Mike's. The 5th was a renegade. She went to Providence. Good school, but it's no St. Mike's. So we thought, it'd be nice to go to Vermont for a while, and we thought we'd exit from here. But this opportunity opened up, and it was an opportunity to get back to Connecticut, to be with friends, family, and
That's good.
so it's really one of those too good to pass up type of opportunities.
I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very much.
I've so enjoyed working with
Oh,
you.
it's been a gas.
And putting you on. You've been on the show a lot, more so than most, actually.
I never got my mug.
Oh, I'll have to give you one of them then. Well, because never mind.
That's a long story.
That's
You
a
don't
long
want-
story.
You don't want to go into it.
That's a long story. Good grief. They are so expensive.
Yeah, aren't they though?
Get that.
Surprise.
Well, I got a name of somebody who's I'm supposed to talk to help me out so I can buy some.
Good.
So we'll see if it works. Anyway, why don't you...
Sure. There's a lot to talk about, both about your career here in Vermont and the Central Vermont Chamber. Why don't we, as well as the legislative session this year, let's talk.
topic.
Let's talk a little bit about, some of what you might consider the landmark initiatives that you undertook at the Central Vermont Chamber.
Well, the first thing I had to do was fill some extremely large, both figuratively and literally, boots, and that would be George Malik.
Yeah. Did you know
George-
George, Ben?
I do, yeah. Yep.
George was the executive director, president of the Central Vermont Chamber for 37 years. And he really built a dynamite organization. And anybody coming in after him would be challenged. And we were challenged, I was challenged. But George was very, very generous. He never once said, Bill, this is how I would do it. If I asked him for advice, he would say, here's what I think, but do what you want. He never intruded. He really was very generous in introducing me around town, getting me involved with a lot of different groups and organizations, meeting a lot of people, and really was a good mentor for me for more than a year
That's nice.
while he was still with us. And we did some things differently. We changed. The board had not had a strategic planning session in quite some time. So we did a strategic plan, and we're about to embark on a new one because it's a 3-year plan that, unlike most strategic plans, people do strategic planning all the time, and after about 6 months, it sits up on the shelf and everybody forgets
Oh,
about
yes.
it, which is
That's standard, right? SOP.
it's awful that
Yeah.
that happens. Well, our board's a very dynamic, involved board. They said, no, once a month, everybody that's involved with leading one facet of the strategic plan reports to the board on the status of where we are, what have we accomplished, what challenges are we facing as a result of this, how do we make midterm corrections. So it's been a very dynamic part of the organization, and with that, we set up a whole slew of committees. We've put on some new programming. We've gotten involved much more deeply with legislative initiatives, and we've had a lot of fun too.
That's great. Well, it's a good group. It's the who's who of Central Vermont business, for sure.
It is. We have a very broad cross-section of membership in the Central Vermont Chamber. We have everybody from the largest employers like National Life to small mom and pops to independent contractors to sole proprietors in every possible level and career area.
Every
of,
time we hear the words independent contractor, we go, I mean, are they
Yeah.
ever going to
We
get that
fixed
set
that
up? We
now.
fixed that, yeah. Did we?
Kind of.
Sort of.
Mostly.
Yeah.
But it still
It's-
needs some tweaking.
Oh,
but
my
it's
God, it's
mostly
been
done.
like 10 years.
Yep.
They never stop.
That was the first initiative I got involved with here. Well, no, actually it wasn't. That was the second one. The first one was local option taxes.
And we know you didn't like those.
No, George.
You had leftover signs from George. He had those signs
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, George didn't even have to talk to me about it. As soon as he explained what it was, I said, these are bad.
Yeah.
They're
yeah,
bad. And they still are bad.
Yeah.
They don't produce what they should produce, what they're promising to produce. And all it is just another tax on individuals and visitors to the region. And
Right.
they don't do what they're supposed to be doing.
And we
Fair
know
enough.
this. Well, George knows it. I have to tell you, he had a reputation almost like Bill Doyle, who was
Yeah.
at every meeting.
Yeah.
George was at every meeting. Whenever there was something like that, he was there.
Yeah.
I don't know how he spread his time out, but he
Yeah.
must have gotten home at some ridiculous hour every night.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
It's an interesting position to be being the president. You're not just working 9 to 5 or 8 to
No.
4:30. It's those hours. You could throw those out the
So are
window.
you the sole lobbyist for the group, or do you rely on some of your members sometimes?
We call on our members to
Yeah,
help
yeah.
us very much,
Yeah.
and our members have been very successfully helping us.
Because I always think, as much as the lobbyists play a very important role, I think seeing the faces of the people you're talking about has a almost more impact than the lobbyists do, because You know, if you're talking, I'm trying to remember some of your members' names, but if Wayne Lamberton goes up and it's Wayne talking about his business, I think it has more of an impact.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, the lobbyists, and believe me, lobbyists are not bad people.
No, they're not. This
They're-
is Vermont.
They're representing their constituency in the manner in which their constituents want them to be represented. I've been a lobbyist for 40 years, and I can tell you, I'll let you in on a secret. Never once have I delivered a satchel of money to anybody.
Really?
No,
Shoot.
never once. You know, it's not what we do.
No.
Lobbyists inform people, they give you information, they help you formulate your opinion, your idea, your concerns. They try to clear through the noise and say, this is what the real impacts will be. So that when you're faced with a bill that has to be voted on, you're aware of everything before the votes are cast.
Yeah, they rely on you for that information. We're lobbyists.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
know that?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
did?
Well,
Yeah.
and in Vermont, there's even another layer to that because legislators don't have paid staff.
Exactly.
Right.
No one in that, no one except for the speaker and the pro tem and the lieutenant governor have staff
Right.
in that building.
And not too many either, just
And
like one.
yeah,
Very
lieutenant
small.
governor has
Yeah.
one, pro tem has one, speaker might have two. I don't know, I'm not really sure. But they don't have staff, so they rely on
Yes.
lobbyists to bring them information and do research for them, and that's part of a citizen legislature.
It is, and it's good. The only thing that I would, and it's not unique to Vermont, but I would suggest that when you're testifying before these committees, you have to do this, because sometimes the information that's presented is not exactly fully correct. Leave it like that.
Good point.
That's always
Yeah.
I've always been amused being a numbers person, looking at the exact same data set. Two people can get very different meanings
different-
out of
yeah,
the
right,
exact
right.
same data set.
Which you can do, but it's when people go in and purposely misstate the facts.
Right.
That's when it hurts. I mean, you can look at anything. What was it? Mark Twain said there's 3 types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And you can do anything.
Numbers can be
with it.
anything,
You
right?
can. And people will look at data and they can interpret it differently, and that's legitimate.
Yeah.
But when people walk in
Yeah.
and they sit before a hearing and they tell the representatives and senators that this is what happens and this is the truth as I'm telling it, and then you sit back and you say, that's just an outright lie.
Right.
And you have to go
And
in
it does happen.
It does
And it does,
happen,
right.
and you have to go in and clean it up, but it's what they hear
Yeah.
that it's now part of the conversation.
What's even more damaging is when the data that's being presented falsely is reinforces something that the committee might already anecdotally believe to be true.
Right,
Yeah.
and it just reinforces it.
And
Yeah.
you're never going to convince them otherwise
Yeah.
at
Right.
that point.
Yeah, and-
Yeah.
That, which is very sad. That's hardly the spirit of how it's supposed to
Well,
go.
that's human too. Like
Yeah, yeah,
when you already anecdotally think something is true, and then you hear a piece of evidence, true or not,
Yeah.
that backs it up, you're not going to ask questions about it.
That's why this is a good idea.
Yeah, that is.
And
We
if
we
you're
don't
not
do
afraid
that.
of doing that,
Yeah.
you do it, then it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got nothing to hide.
Yeah, well, they do tape at least, thank goodness, these days.
Yes.
They tape it also. That's
Yes.
good. Some committees still don't, but I think most of them do.
They all do.
Oh, they
They
all
all
do
do.
now.
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay, 'cause-
required.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just take you back a little bit,
Sure.
not from the chamber, but you had written a wonderful piece. You write a lot of commentary, and you wrote something on the history of Memorial Day, and I just thought that was so cool. Could you just talk a little bit about why you wrote that and a little bit about how you look at Memorial Day? And
Well, Memorial Day is a very, very important holiday that we tend to forget the reason for it. We look forward to the barbecue and getting the friends coming over and let's pass around a few beers and soft drinks and have a great time and yada yada. But what we're looking at is really memorializing the brave men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country so that we can enjoy
Right.
these long weekends. It started right after the end of the Civil War with folks in the North and the South decorating graves of the folks who served and died in battle, and it just grew from there. The Grand Army of the Republic, and you're going to kill me, but I can't remember the names of the folks that were involved. They made it part of their mission to create a unifying day to do that, and it was essentially held from just immediately after the Civil War, the year following 1865, 66. It was created, and it spread as these chapters of the GAR got together. They said, we are going to follow through with our commandant's directive and create this and pay honor and tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
What made you write that? Because people are not doing the honoring and the, they seem to have a different view of Memorial Day these days.
For exactly that reason.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a good way to honor and thank the members who are serving in the armed services now.
Right.
I mean, it's just an appropriate thing to do, and it's. I always love Memorial Day, not because it's the quote unofficial start of the summer, but because it's a period of time when we should reflect upon the sacrifices made that made this country
And if you're
great.
not honoring war, there's a lot of
No.
people who don't like war. I can't imagine anybody likes war.
No.
But you should at least recognize the men and women who sacrifice so much.
And that's what it was.
Well, that's
And
great.
it went from Decoration Day to Memorial Day to honor all of the those who've died.
And some of that history you can still see. For example, the National Cemetery, they still decorate
Right.
every single grave
Yep.
site in the National Cemetery.
Yes.
Some of that tradition is, there's other places around the country that they do that, but that's kind of like the main one.
Right.
Yes.
And so some of that tradition has been carried on.
Yeah.
But I think, it's, you're right. We haven't had a major war in,
Knock on wood.
No, but
quite a
we've been
while.
fighting one for 15 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
but not one that like tested the national, spirit, I guess.
I find it so difficult when people don't honor and respect, and like they'll knock down tombstones and
That's-
do things to the cemeteries are just horrendous.
It's really not difficult to just take even 1 minute out of the entire 3-day weekend
Right, and say
and just
thank you.
pause for a minute and think, why am I able to enjoy this particular weekend this way?
Right.
Because of the sacrifices that were made.
Right.
And that's not the only one I go off on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love the 4th of July.
Oh, good.
You know
You
what I
read
do
another
every-
one? I didn't see that one.
Every 4th of July, I read the Declaration of Independence.
Do you
And
really?
everybody ought to do that because it tells you why this country was created.
You should go up to St. Albans. They have people line up, and they each take a paragraph of the Constitution, and and they read it, the whole thing.
The Constitution's
it's-
pretty boring. I would stick to the
Well,
Declaration.
No,
of
the
Independence.
Constitution's pretty darn.
But everybody stands in line, and then when they're finished, if the lines, they go back
Yeah.
and they do the whole thing right in St. Albans.
It's
really
a
cool.
fascinating document.
If you're
It is a
there,
fascinating.
yeah.
If you like that stuff, it's a
Yeah.
fascinating
I
document.
mean, Jefferson was right. If we are going to overthrow the government, we need to tell people why.
Well,
And he also said, a little revolution every now and then is not a bad idea. But he very clearly laid out this is what's going on, so that people had a chance to understand why we were revolting against the king and why we wanted England out and we wanted our own country. And it's just a remarkable document.
That's great. And I bet your members love it that you write these things.
You
They're
know-
very supportive, that gang.
We've been very fortunate from really two directions in particular, the Times-Argus and the World, that offer us the opportunity to have my column, such as it is,
Right.
in the papers. And I'm very grateful for that because it does challenge me sometimes to write something, but it also gives us the opportunity to talk about the chamber and what we're doing.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about one of them a little bit later
Sure.
on, about the gentlemen and the men, ladies and gentlemen, when they disrupted the House.
Oh, sure.
We'll talk about that one later. Anyway,
Well, speaking of disrupting, the end of the legislative session this year was quite disruptive and outside the normal course of of action. Let's talk a little bit about how the legislature ended and just the general demeanor of the legislative session
and
this
what
year.
your folks thought about it.
The session this year was very, I don't want to call it laid back, but it was a lot less contentious than previous sessions that I've been up for. There was an understanding of let's work this together collegially as best
Right.
we can, but then there became some discussions and differences between the House and the Senate, and I suppose within their own caucuses.
Right.
I don't attend the caucus sessions. frankly have other things I'd want to do.
Anything.
And I'm sure they don't really want Bill Moore sitting in on the caucus, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want me there either.
You're allowed, though,
You know.
just for the record.
Oh, yeah.
Citizens, anybody's welcome.
Anybody's welcome to attend the caucus sessions to get a good briefing and get a good idea of what's going on. And that is good. And it's almost unique to Vermont that that occurs. But there were discussions that went on that bills that could have been passed by larger majorities in both houses, they stalled. And they stalled because of the agreements that could not be completed
Right.
between the House and the Senate. And as a result, the House ceased actions on a Friday, the Senate ceased on a Wednesday the following week. So it was a little
Thinking the
disruptive.
House was going to come back by Wednesday. Because
And they did not.
Let's see.
Mitzi just closed it down on Friday, and the pro tem,
Tim Ash.
Tim Ash, thank you, I've got Shap in my mind. Tim Ash, and he assumed they were going to come back by
Yeah.
Wednesday so they could finish up. But you've got two things, is the hourly wage and paid family leave, and I'm sure your guys were not upset that that didn't pass.
No, we were flat out opposed to the paid parental leave and the minimum wage increase.
Right.
And people said, well, why? Well, frankly, they're really not necessary. If you look at paid leave, most employers now, particularly because of the low unemployment rate, are offering benefits and incentives for employees to be able to work. They're increasing the amount of personal time off, and says, go and do that. The cost for the paid leave, initially it was going to be a tax on employees only. Well, we looked at it, we said, well, supposing the employees aren't going to be participating in that, that's a problem. Well, first of all, we oppose tax increases, period. We think the way to begin is by looking at budget expenditures and scaling back the budgets before you start talking about raising income, raising tax rates. Let's look at what programs are succeeding, just like you would in a business.
Right.
What's working, what's not working, what can we get rid of, what should we keep, what should be jettisoned, what can we tweak, look at those projects. Never happens. That never happens. So based on tax increase for it was going to be employee only, and that came out of the Senate. The House said, well, employer. Well, guess what? No matter how you put it together, there would never be enough revenue
Right.
generated to cover the nut that would be needed if everybody took paid leave as offered.
Right.
So now we're considering down the road, unintended consequences, increased tax rates, higher taxes again, and those would be undoubtedly passed off onto the business community. So we opposed the paid leave. The minimum wage increase, again, market rates are driving wages today. And people can find above $10.78 jobs. They can find above $15 jobs that are entry-level positions across the state if they look.
Yep.
If you're looking for a job and you're looking for $15 an hour, you can find it now. It's a mandate on business. And believe me, when I tell you that those costs will be passed on directly to the consumers,
Right.
they will be. That's one of those statements that's kind of glossed over. Well, we'll have more people earning more money so they can afford it. Well, yeah, except it's not a one-for-one change. For every increase in the minimum wage that you pay in salary, there's also an increase in the taxes you're paying. So it's not just a nickel and a nickel for a nickel. It's higher than that.
Right.
Your employer taxes on wages are about 14%.
Because I don't think the profit margin for some of these small businesses is just minuscule. I think they think they're huge, but they're not, are they?
Yeah, profit margin on businesses averages 6%.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sorry. That's
Higher?
no, that's the big bad guy. That's Walmart. Walmart's got a 6% profit margin, and those profits, by the way, go back into the shareholders. And if the owners of the company that have a lot of shares benefit from that, so do the people that have one or two shares.
Right.
So for
What,
people,
do you know what
it's-
the average?
the
small
average
business-
small business margin's about 3.5%.
Oh, that makes more. Yeah, it's
So
nothing.
they're working on the edge.
Right.
So if you're telling an employer you're going to pay a $5 increase in the minimum wage, okay, add 14% to that for taxes, so now you're up to about $6.75, $8. You're up there
Yeah.
in what has to be added on for the increase. The employer is going to say, well, I guess I don't fill that position. Or what's happened in Washington State, where when they got to $13 an hour, they say, well, we just freeze the hours or we scale back the hours. and employees actually started losing wages, where they were on average losing $121 a month in
Wow.
a salary or wages
Right.
because their hours were shifting backwards because the employers can't afford it.
Right.
And it has other impacts. If you look at what's going on in some of the bigger stores, like a Walmart, or in restaurants like a McDonald's, and I don't single them out for bad reasons, but they're looking at their costs. And what they're doing is they're putting computers in to do the checkout. So you're eliminating
Right.
jobs because the cost of
Right.
that front-end employee now becomes so high, it's more efficient, more effective, cost-effective to replace those. Is that a
Right.
good thing? Not necessarily.
Yeah,
Not
Walmart's
necessarily.
doing that.
Yeah.
You know, Hannaford's is doing
Yeah.
that. Lowe's, Home Depot,
Yeah.
they're all doing,
Yeah.
Yeah,
doing
and
that.
it's not just the big box stores that do it. The equipment is expensive, but you will find them in small,
Applebee's
very
has
small
on the
business.
table that you're supposed to put your order in.
Oh, yeah.
all the chain restaurants. now,
yeah.
Yeah, they're all shifting to that because the mandates that are being put on employers to provide things, they're saying, you know, in the long run, right now we can't find employees anyway, but for our own benefits, we invest in the equipment, and now you're talking about real jobs being lost. And in the argument in the General Assembly, one of the reasons I think you ought to do this was the argument put forward by proponents was, well, we're only going to lose about 3,000 jobs. Excuse me? State of
Wow,
Vermont
right.
should not be in the business of causing jobs to go away.
Right.
That's why we oppose it too. The state of Vermont should be creating a climate that allows job investment, job creation, which will float wages higher
Right.
through competition, which is why many people are above the minimum wage now anyway. And the competition is raising it. It works.
Because we were talking about if I go into your company and making 10, mandated at 10 or 12, somebody who's been there already and is making that amount of money is going to go, hello,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I need to be bumped up. So you got to bump up the chain
Exactly.
to make it fair.
Yeah.
What you're paying.
the other
right?
thing too, you know, that you know, you assume that you start paying, you know, Walmart starts paying their employees $15 an hour. The gas station up the street starts paying their employees $15 an
Right.
hour. The cost of their goods go up. They're also assuming that your income is going up, and you may not be making $15
Right.
an hour. You may not be impacted at all by, you know, that wage increase, and that's cost out of your pocket.
Yeah, right.
And you know,
So
when you
screwed
talk about Walmart, because they are the big boogeyman, they are the big target. Walmart provides good benefits for their
They do, and
employees.
good training,
good
management training.
upward mobility
Yeah.
within the company. They have college scholarships they're providing. You know, so they're not the bad guys that are out there. They really aren't. And-
It is really a very good place to work.
yeah.
Well, they
We
employ a
just-
lot of you know, people that may have special needs also, which a
Exactly.
lot
Yes,
of
they do.
employers
They do.
can't accommodate.
Yeah.
Yep,
They do.
That's right.
So we talked about paid family leave, minimum wage. What other big bills were kind of left on the table at the end of the session this year?
Not so much left on the table, but we're very concerned about. We participated in a press conference last week on medical monitoring. The bill passed the Senate and the House in a modified version from the original.
We didn't even cover that.
Oh, yeah.
Explain that
that's-
to us.
me-
What-
Medical monitoring went in with, as a result of what's going on down in Bennington County with the PFOAs.
Oh.
It's a knee-jerk reaction to do something to prevent this from happening again.
Right.
Well, there's law and case law on the books in Vermont that will address releases, hazardous releases, and making people whole. If you're injured, if you have a problem developed because of that, if there's pollution, there are pieces in place now, so we opposed it. And what ultimately started out with strict liability that said, the minute you use this product, if it's on the toxic substance, the hazardous substance list for the state or the feds, you assume absolute liability
Right.
for anything that
You
happens.
talked about this last year when
Yeah.
you were on this, so that's been around a while.
Same bill came
Right.
through. This year, they took the strict liability off, but the medical monitoring portion is still there. And what it does is it requires companies that may have released a toxic or hazardous substance, whether or not it's within the permitted amount of release, whether or not it's being used properly. If anybody is exposed to that, or there's there's exposure, well, it'd have to be individuals in this instance, they would qualify for medical monitoring for life simply because of exposure. Whether or not they have any incidents, whether they have any problems, whether they have any latent diseases that come on, they can request and be required by the courts to provide for medical monitoring
Wow.
for life. Problems with that are many, including, up front, there's 16 states that have a medical monitoring procedure, and what we were recommending was that you get more in line with those states that have that are a little bit more responsible. This is any release. So even background exposure that you could be related to, you could say, the background levels, it doesn't matter. This level came out and I was exposed, so I want medical monitoring.
Can you prove, how do you prove, like say you, God forbid, had cancer and you were gone from this company for 3-4 years, how do they prove a nexus between the chemicals in that company and your current cancer? Or don't you have to prove that?
All you have to prove is the exposure, that exposure
Wow.
took place.
Regardless of what happened in between where you
Exactly.
were for 4 years?
Yeah, and it's for companies of 10 or more employees that meet certain specific SIC classifications.
Aye.
So all manufacturers will be impacted. Most mining and quarry operations will be
Who's going
affected
to
by it.
give you insurance for this?
Nobody.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to be stupid enough to give you a policy
Yeah.
that is unending,
It was,
open-ended?
testimony was brought into the committees that said, we don't think we can underwrite this.
Right.
The banks were saying, and I don't think the banks testified, but the banks have told us as lobbyists, we probably wouldn't be giving out loans to companies because it creates a system whereby if you're using something today legally in a responsible way, but it's later found out to be
Right.
toxic or
Exactly.
hazardous and goes on that list, well, then we go back to day one. So anybody that was exposed,
But you didn't know it and it was law
you didn't know it
at
at
that
the
time,
time. And talk about some of these chemicals that are on the list. Do you ever use window cleaner
right? Sure.
in a business? Do you ever use window cleaner in a business?
I'm
Of course
sure,
you do.
yeah.
Well, every element of the ingredients of window cleaner is on the toxic or hazardous list except water.
Whoa.
So by using that window spray on cleaning a desktop or cleaning off your copier or even, God forbid, cleaning windows,
Yeah, I don't do that very
you're,
often.
you're exposing the individual
Yeah.
who's spraying and anybody that's around them
Wow.
during that process. They're exposed to these hazardous chemicals. They therefore automatically would be able to say, I want to set a benchmark of what I look like now. Do I have any problems? And every year I want to be tested to see if there's anything developing.
Oh, my
And the employer will have to pay for that. So we are urging Governor Scott to veto the bill because it will
Right.
have a chilling effect on business across the state.
When, I just struggle when something I think is fairly obvious that that's a problem, why our legislators don't quite get it, because they are intelligent people.
They are.
I don't understand why they just keep heading down the path, no matter what the answer is.
And you have to be aware of the law of unintended consequences. And I understand why the bill was introduced. The situation in Bennington County is untenable.
Yes, right,
I mean, it's
right.
absolutely untenable. But this law will not do anything to help Bennington County. It's going forward.
Right.
Prospectively. And the net effect of it will be to shut down businesses.
Yeah.
And so you
Well,
won't have to
especially
worry
if they
about
can't
it.
get insurance, forget it. How can you even open up your doors without insurance?
At a time when we're trying to create a pro-growth, pro-jobs, pro-business economy that can hire people, put real good wages on the
Right.
table. These are the types of things businesses look at when they're relocating or considering expansion. Existing businesses expanding have said, we may not stick around. I know of a couple of businesses, one in particular that I can't talk about publicly who they are, but they've got 2 operations and they're considering expanding either in Vermont or in the
Yeah,
other
let
state.
me guess.
And guess what?
Right.
This has just pushed them over the edge that they're now thinking, well, let's go. And there's going to be a loss of jobs.
Yeah.
And it will not be an insignificant job loss.
Wow. I love us.
I mean, the legislature, nobody goes in there intending to do harm to anybody. I honestly
No,
don't
no,
believe
that's
they do.
true, and
They really
that's true.
don't.
I agree with that.
But they get caught behind those screaming voices that tell them you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. 6 people contacting you on an issue. To your point earlier, about, is it the lobbyist making the noise or the individual?
Right.
If you've got 6 people making a noise, you've got their attention.
Right, you listen.
And so, and the lobbyist, as hard as we try to prevent or provide accurate, realistic, current information, we get drowned out by that.
Right.
And if you've got it in your mind that all business is bad and evil, then that's the way you may
Right.
move without really stepping back and saying, well, wait a minute, let's take a hard look at this.
Now, would most of those people have insurance though? Like if we talk about you getting cancer 4 years after you leave my company, don't you have insurance now that would pay for your illness? So why are they looking backwards?
Well, I might have, but
Yeah, but you
the
may not.
problem is if I have health insurance, I'm still with the same employer. Depending on what's happened to my plan and how that all works out,
Right.
I may be covered. It would be a
It's not-
workers'
this
comp.
is like
It would be a workers' comp
This
case.
is like unemployment insurance where they go back and nail
Yeah,
3 and 4 businesses before.
yeah. I mean, it would typically fall within the realm of workers' comp
Yeah.
is where it would come because it occurred on the job. But if you're no longer working for that
Right.
individual,
Right.
your workers' comp coverage is gone. So you need to be covered by somebody. And so this would provide that coverage, but it just carries it to the extreme. And it's reaction in
I'm
the
going to take a
extremis.
look at this more.
Yeah,
This is
Yeah.
serious.
what it needs to be, if they could bring it more in line with the other states that have this, that will say, okay, you've got to reach certain levels of exposure
Right.
prior to having
Right.
the monitoring kick in. That makes more sense. It's really a bad bill, and we do urge the governor to veto
Yeah,
it.
well, we'll help with that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your take on the way that the end of the legislative session went down? In the last couple of years, it's been tension between the governor and the legislature, and this year it was tension between the House and the Senate. What do you think that means for the legislative process in Vermont, and what does that mean for some of these large initiatives that the legislature is trying to undertake?
Well, part of the problem is when you have super majorities, you get voices from all sections of the caucus. And you think that, okay, we can do what we want to do now. But not everybody is an extreme liberal within the caucus, and not everybody is an extreme conservative within
Right.
the caucus. So there's voices within that are demanding certain things, and as the leader of the caucus, you're trying to hold things together so that you can get a vote out, so that you can pass reasonable legislation that addresses the issues that your caucus feels important. That doesn't seem to have occurred this time
Right.
out. It looks like the House was interested in paid leave, the Senate was interested in minimum wage, and they couldn't come to an agreement on how to make these work. And as a result, you had the House said, well, we've accomplished everything we need to accomplish except the paid leave portion. We'll come back in January and deal with that.
Right.
And the Senate said, well, before you go, we want to take one more shot at it. And the House said, no, we're done.
Yep.
And the Senate said, but no, you're really not. We know you're going to come back. And the House held firm and said, no, we've done our job. We've accomplished what we want to do. This is the first
was so
session of a biennium. And we will just take it up in January,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
what will happen. Minimum wage and paid family leave will come back in January. And they will start, not from scratch, but I'm sure they will try to hammer out an agreement early on so this doesn't happen again.
Well, and to rewind to last year, both of those bills were sent to the governor, and both
Yes.
of them were vetoed. The House didn't have the membership to override
Right.
either of those vetoes. So this is part of the calculus that they were playing at the end of the session, is that the speaker needed enough votes to override a
Right.
veto. They didn't want to send another bill
Yeah.
to the governor that
Do
was
you
going to
think
get
he
vetoed.
had it? I don't think he had the votes, did he?
He
It was close.
The way the bills passed, they were very, very close
Yeah.
on whether, they passed with majorities, but the question was, do those majorities carry over to the veto? And that's where the uncertainty
right.
came in.
Right.
And it's great to pass a bill, but if the governor's going to veto it, and you can't guarantee you're going to override the bill,
Right.
you're probably better off to
Leaving
just
it go.
retrench and
Yeah.
pull it back.
I
in.
was just telling Bill before the show, I talked to Shap one year when they had this supermajority, and I said, it must be much easier for you this year. He goes, no
No, it's
way.
harder.
Yeah, it's harder. He said he would rather have the number's much closer, so they've got to work together to beat the other side. He said, because everybody wants to go home with a win for their town because they're in charge.
Yeah.
And he said it's incredible to balance everything.
Yeah.
And obviously it
Yeah.
didn't work too well.
No, and Mitzi had the same issue.
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
Yeah,
that
it's-
it's- and there's a lot of expectations going in. On the heels of these two vetoes, they gain a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and then they have all these expectations from voters that
Yeah.
they're going to go past these two bills, and they don't.
Yeah. So part of the problem is explaining to the constituency why you weren't able to get it done. And that unfortunately falls on the leadership to explain what,
Right.
you know, we will get it done. And that's pretty much what they,
Well, what I didn't know is Mitzi and 2 or 3 other people had to come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and have a mock session.
Gavel.
Yeah.
To make it continue and then end on Wednesday, I guess, because they both have to agree, right? On
I think they can't be out of session for more than 3 days.
right.
So
Oh,
the-
okay, so she came in,
So
I
it's a
didn't even
Friday.
realize that.
So it's probably a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right,
Because you
right.
can do Saturday, Sunday, be out, and I think the rules call for Monday, both houses cannot be apart for more than 3 days.
Right.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
those are the
So
rules.
they
I'd
came
stand
in and had
corrected,
a
but I
mock
think that's-
session.
Well,
Which
and
is funny.
so basically the House passed a resolution to adjourn and then sent it to the Senate, and then
Yeah.
they needed to have one of those 3-day meetings.
Yeah.
They just gavelled and
Yeah.
gavelled out, and then that advanced the calendar for the
Yeah.
Senate.
Yeah, there's a couple of really key things we've got to get in with you here. Your association health plans.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that would cheer you right up.
You
Let's
know,
talk about that, because you were, the announcement of that was very exciting
It
for
was.
you and your members.
and for
and all
all
of the
business,
chambers,
for
right?
all the chambers and
Yeah.
all small business.
Explain to our folks what that was and what happened.
What the government gives, the government can also take away. And association health plans were regular parts of our economy and parts of our employee benefit type of offerings prior to the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act eliminated association health plans in an effort to drive people into the exchanges so that businesses would have to do away with, if you had an association plan, your employees go into the exchange and build up the levels of the exchange. And we all know how well the Vermont Exchange is working.
Particularly at first.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly, and I was a victim of that when I first came here. That's another story. But the offerings were eliminated. You no longer could do it. And the penalty was, here's, Mr. Businessman, you either provide health insurance for your employees that is comparable and provides certain things, or you're gonna have to pay a $600 per head tax for not
Wow.
providing the insurance. Well, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
That's, $6,000 a head versus 600 a head. Okay, you guys, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you're in the exchange.
right.
Have a nice day. In January of 2018, President Trump signed an executive order authorizing the reinstitution of association health plans. And it took Department of Labor until July of last year to promulgate the regulations that would allow them to come in. And they essentially said, you've got to provide minimum care amounts at these levels, and they clearly said what they were. And we were working with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the state to be able to offer association health plan, as was the other group that provides it, BNR. And in September, we were given approval on September 30th. Business Resources was given, I think, 2 weeks in advance of that. And so we had from October 1 until December 31 to get these plans in place and put out, which we did. And they were competitively priced, and they were good programs. The one that
And this was there was like a couple of hundred people involved in this, right? It
So-
was all the chambers, or most
yeah,
of them.
total between the two programs, there's about 5,000 people that are currently
Right,
covered.
right.
BRN has the majority of them, but the chambers, we do. I mean, we've got 14 of our members
Great.
participated in it. And they provided health care. The chamber plan was kind of a hybrid of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Gold and Silver plan. So, and it covered all the mandated requirements, required absolutely everything you need to provide. A pre-existing condition, age 26, the whole bit,
Right,
those key parts of
right.
the Affordable Care Act. somebody went to court down in D.C. and the court down in D.C. ruled the Affordable Care Act, the president's executive order exceeds his authority.
Oh.
So association health plans are no longer
Oh,
allowed. Department of Justice is appealing that, but they did not ask for a stay on the ruling. The Vermont House passed a bill that would have eliminated association health plans entirely. The Senate passed a bill that said, well, no, they're okay until, if you currently have one, it's okay until the federal, as long as they meet federal requirements
Right.
and the federal criteria. Federal criteria is in limbo because it's in court. And so out of what we're told, an abundance of caution, the state has said, well, we changed our minds. The Department of Financial Regulation said, changed our mind effective December 31 this year. The association health plans go away.
Wow.
So what you've done is you've told employers, you're supposed to be providing benefits for your employees, which they are. We provide them with an opportunity to give a health plan that's a solid health plan that's going to reduce their cost by anywhere from 8 to 5%, depending on the type of plan you're
He
involved
said
in.
no.
For employers with 100 or fewer employees. And here we go, now all of a sudden it's like Lucy with the football.
Wow.
Can't do it.
Right.
And so now those plans that are currently in the VACE and the BNR plan die on December 31st. And the employers now have to go back out and either let their employees get back into the exchange or figure out a way to work with the
At more
providers
expense.
at a greater expense,
Wow.
particularly if you look what the filings were. So once again, small business is getting whacked because particularly, what went on in the courts is one thing, but the healthcare advocate for the state, Michael Fisher, absolutely incorrectly stated that these plans are going to draw everybody out of the exchange, and it's all that's going to be left are bad risk for the exchange.
It's just your members in the
It's
chamber.
just our members in the
Right.
chambers. It's not everybody getting
Wow.
yanked out. So another good reason why you have to do this.
Really, for sure.
But because of the
Why
federal,
do businesses stay in this state, I swear?
because of the federal action, though, DFR said, well, we're not going to run the risk of the businesses not being able to offer their program. So finito at December
That
31.
must have really,
It hurts.
you're crazy.
It hurts
Yeah,
because now these businesses have to go out and
Right.
find new benefits.
right. One good thing always, what is that expression? No good thing goes unpunished.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. So a couple other things that were positive or approaching positive that happened during the legislative session. Things like the economic and workforce development bills.
That was good.
I know that you were following some of those. Anything else, or maybe we want to talk more about those two bills?
Yeah, the workforce development bill is going to really enhance apprenticeship opportunity,
Yeah.
apprenticeship training in the state. So that's very important because you need it. It will provide funding either to the employer or to the employee, depending on how the application works. But they have to be in a bona fide, real
Right.
apprenticeship training
Right.
program. It can't be Bill Moore going out and saying, okay, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to teach people how to use a hammer and nail, and start banging them properly. It's got to be a bona fide, certified, regular, real apprenticeship training program that businesses can offer. And there's a lot out there. There's the union apprenticeship training programs, and there's non-union apprenticeship training programs. And as long as you're involved in that, it expands the opportunity for doing that.
Right.
It hones in on the Vermont Talent Pipeline Management model that says, okay, how do we go about training for the jobs that we need in Vermont?
Right.
The state chamber has the Vermont Futures Project. They tell us we need to be able to replace 10,000 years of 10,000 jobs a year just to stay where we are, to stay at the steady state level. And the Vermont Talent Pipeline Management, working with private industry, said, okay, let's turn the model upside down. Let's go meet with the employers and find out what kind of training do you want, what's needed, what's the best, most current modern training available, and let's create that training for you. And the Talent Pipeline Management Group works with the National Center for Construction Excellence, Education, and Engineering, They've created it used to be called the Wheels of Training. I'm not sure if that's still what it's called, but that is an absolute bona fide training program
Great.
for construction industry.
Great.
They're very engaged with training for medical support, for CNA training and LPN training,
right.
getting that going. And they're also engaged very heavily with manufacturing and zeroing in on really solid training for manufacturing programs.
I love the bill because they actually use the word technical education.
Exactly.
I was so excited because I've been fighting just quietly myself for years about the importance of tech ed. And both bills, last year's bill and this year's bill. And I just hope that the legislature holds those people accountable about when they're reporting and making sure they're making progress. Because these are actually two darn good bills, but they've got to make sure they get implemented.
They have
which
to.
we don't do sometimes.
And accountability is key. You can't allow somebody to set up a program and just have it in a cycle where
Exactly.
the same people come in and go out, come in and go out, come in and go out. You have to measure success.
Yeah, we covered it a lot here because we thought, and we did some testifying on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
two bills, there's H533 and S164.
Right, and what was last year's bill? I can't remember. It was a
I
great.
can't
You're
remember.
asking too much.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry.
You're taxing the
Sorry.
memory.
Yeah, no, it was a great bill too, and
Yeah.
we had Bill Botso on because he left last year.
Yeah.
And that man has worked his entire career as a legislator for tech ed,
Yeah.
and I was just so glad that's the year he decided to retire when he had that bill under
Yeah.
his belt.
Yeah.
That was great.
He was a
Yeah.
great chair
Yeah.
for the
I like
committee.
Bill.
He did great work for the state.
I have two questions because I want you to talk about the Athena Award
Mm-hmm.
before we run out of time. But I was wondering if you guys are tracking the Act 250 discussions. They were in the Ethan Allen room all the time, and were you sending anybody in there to
we
watch them?
We were in and out of that
Were you?
constantly.
Because they didn't do anything this year, so I'm assuming in the election year they're going to pounce us with a
Yeah.
big Acts 250 bill.
Yeah,
You
if
think?
you like Act 250 now, you're going to love it in the future.
Stay tuned.
Some
Keeps
of the
getting better, huh?
Yeah,
some
right,
of
just
the
keeps
conversation will be beneficial. They're going to make it easier to do downtown development in a designated downtown is what we're hearing and what we're seeing and what
Right.
it looks like, which Maynard in Montpelier, don't even get me going on that one.
Well, they haven't gotten any of the final permits for the hotel and the parking and stuff. That's
Well,
still,
that's because it's being beaten up by a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That's a separate argument
yeah.
entirely.
I just was talking to them over
That-
at the
that-
Capitol Plaza the other day.
That should not be allowed, frankly. The process worked, it's been in place, it was decided on, move forward,
Right.
put the thing up. All you're doing is wasting people's money.
Well, that's
and
what happened to
time.
Wayne Lamberton, right?
Yeah.
When he put up
Yeah.
his travel
Yeah.
building.
Yeah, so that's separate. But Act 250, once you get outside of allowing reasonable development, and again, it's reasonable development in the downtowns, once you get out into the hinterlands, you're gonna be hogtied. You really are, from what they're discussing. It's not gonna be pretty.
It sounds like to me, and maybe that they want the rural people to move towards the cities and not to necessarily be out in rural Vermont.
I'm not even sure that they fully understand how they're putting it together, what they want to do. I mean, they're looking at reducing the line from the top of the mountains down for timber harvesting. And, is this too low or is it too high? Are we moving this, moving that? If you've got the wetland areas and areas around the rivers and streams, pulling those in.
Right.
If you've got, it's really all over the place right now. So to say that any one thing is going to occur would
Were
really
they
be.
talking about cleaning up, was the cleanup water, was that in their discussions in Act 250? Because we still haven't fixed Lake Shape, we don't even have a plan, do we? There's no bill.
They did pass a little piece to help with Lake Champlain.
Did they?
They were looking at increasing the rooms and meals tax for
Right.
tourism, but they found a way to backfill because of surplus revenue coming in from other
They were talking about
sources.
the cloud at one
Yeah,
time,
so
right?
they do have at least a
Oh, good.
small solution in place right now for that, because that's important. We have to fix that.
Yeah,
We
you
have,
think?
you have to clean up the waters. I mean, industry's not out there saying, we got to pollute, let's make sure we have a smog-filled atmosphere, make sure the water's all polluted. And by the way, let's continue dropping oil down into the ground.
Just like Phoenix.
I mean,
When Phoenix has got this mist over it
Yeah.
all the time, it looks like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we're not engaged in that. We don't want that. I mean, what Vermont wants is clean industry. And to get clean industry, it means you got to change the way we're doing things. We need broadband in Vermont. We don't have broadband.
No.
You get outside of Chittenden County, and you're really stretching it to get good broadband, heavy bandwidth that will allow you to get clean industry into Vermont. Without that, we're going nowhere. Of course, there are those who say, well, we don't want industry because that's more automobiles, more trucks, and as a result, we have the carbon footprint increases. Nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. So you want industry that's clean, that can work on broadband, and you want cell service. I was calling one of my daughters driving back from Rhode Island yesterday, calling one of my daughters on Father's Day. She called me to wish me happy Father's Day. I said, great. I think we dropped the call 6 times on 89.
Oh, yeah. There's a block in 89
Hello?
there, just completely dead.
It's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
This is 2019. It's time to get into the 21st century. It's almost a quarter of the way done.
Right.
And we don't have good broadband and we don't have good cell service in Vermont.
Right.
If the legislature wants to address something, that's something they could address in a big way to make these things happen.
Yeah.
Because
And-
otherwise, you're not going to get industry.
Yeah.
And if you're concerned about people driving, if you get broadband to their house, they may not have to leave their house.
Exactly. They
Exactly.
can do it all on
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
pretty sad. All right, so we have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
You have to talk about the Athena Award.
The Athena Award is something we're very proud of. It's an international recognition for an individual who provides supporting services, mentoring, guidance, leadership training for women in business and women professionals. It's an internationally offered award that we've been able to bring to Vermont, working with the Athena International to get it here. It's a statewide award that we'll be awarding 2 awards this coming November. One is the Athena Leadership Award to that person who provides that level of strong mentoring and guidance and counseling, really helping them shatter the glass ceiling and become honored for the work they do. Because
Right.
the people that go through the ceiling, they make it, but it's the people that are guiding them and helping them.
Right.
You know, we want to
Pushing them up.
recognize those folks.
Good.
So that's one, and the Young Professional Leader of the Year, that's another one. We've got a great committee that's pulled this together over the last 8 months, 9 months. We've got some very significant underwriting for it from Community National Bank, Woodridge Rehabilitation and CVMC, from National Life, from People's
Great.
United Bank, from Northfield Savings Bank. This is going to be a great,
great.
great honor. It's offered usually through local chambers of commerce or through women's groups, and we've been able to identify it as something that we really want to bring great recognition to women leaders and the people that mentor those leaders into
great.
Vermont. So it's very
And this
exciting.
is a national or
It's
international?
an international award that
Great.
we've been able to harness and bring to Vermont, and we're working with local chambers to promote it. We'll be working with Green Mountain Power, statewide organizations to promote this opportunity. And it's really exciting. It's great for us. It's going to be
That's
great for
excellent.
Vermont.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yay us.
Well,
Yay
yeah.
ladies.
I mean, we're doing something.
Anyway, we've run out of time, Bill. I cannot thank you enough for everything you've
Thank
done
you.
for Vermont. And
Thanks,
I am
Pat.
incredibly sad you were leaving, but happy for you.
Thank you.
Sounds like the
Thank
right
you very
move.
much.
Thank you
so
very much. Thanks.
We're going to miss it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.